Good evening. I call this Iowa City Community School Board meeting on Tuesday, June 25th, 2019 to order. My name is Janet Godwin, and I want to thank those in the audience, those watching on YouTube, and those following on Twitter for joining us tonight. I'll start by introducing those at the table with me. To my right, Superintendent Steve Murley, Directors Ruthina Malone, Phil Hemingway, Lori Rotland. To my left, Paul Ressler, Sean Eystone, and Kim Colvin, Recording Secretary. The public is reminded that if they wish to speak, they need to complete a speaker form found at the table in the lobby and turn it in. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. All community comment directed at non-agenda items and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting during the community comment section of the agenda. And we will turn to community comment, and we have one speaker, Jennifer Arturo.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Arturo. I live in North Liberty. My kids go to North Central Junior High School. I was here 2 weeks ago speaking to you guys about the Penn OSHA violation. As most of you know, my kids attended Penn Elementary K through 6th grade. I wanted to speak to you guys tonight about resource officers in our school because that seems to be a topic of discussion right now. At the time that my kids were at Penn, Penn had a regular police presence. As most of you know, North Liberty Police Department is right across the street from Penn Elementary. There's literally like one building, commercial building, in between Penn and the police department. It's within walking distance. Their presence was there for yearly education of students, of which my kids took part in. They were there, I saw them there weekly. I'm assuming to assist with traffic or just to make the students safe coming and going to school. And I also saw their presence there monthly, and I assume that those instances were if there was an issue with a student or a parent issue. I once considered calling North Liberty Police Department myself when my child was assaulted by a boy at Penn Elementary. Police accessibility and presence did not decrease violence at Penn. So I think we need to look at that really carefully. What would decrease violence, I believe, at Penn Elementary and at any school would be the following. Making sure that supports are not being blocked by administrators, principal, or staff. Making sure that supports that are in place are being followed by the staff and the principal. Making sure staff are regularly trained in bias education and not discriminating students of color, disability, or economic status, or for any reason. Making sure that staff to peer or peer-to-peer bullying is not tolerated. Terminating staff who harm kids through discrimination. Training staff on how to deal with trauma, neurodiversity, mental illness, not just identifying it. I think you guys need to use Penn as a learning opportunity for the entire district. Violence can be defined more broadly than just potential for school shootings, fights, or threats. Violence can also be defined as systemic oppression against diverse students. Lack of equity will always result in children who are being provoked, ignored, pushed to frustrations in an institution demanding results from them when they were never given the security of belonging. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. That concludes community comment this evening. Next up is approval of our agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
I move that we approve tonight's agenda.
Second.
Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. I'm not getting it. You didn't get it?
I'm not seeing it yet. I'm agreeing.
You're
Yes.
yay. Okay, thank you. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you, Kim. Next up, the consent agenda. Phil and Ruthina, I believe you reviewed the bills this month,
Yes.
or this pay period.
We had $2.2 million, 396,000 of which was Go Bond money. I know Sean and Ruthina both had some very good questions that they had brought up. We had $56,000 worth of AP exams. I'm just been doing some more research on, I want to do some more research on that, and the superintendent submitted $30.16 for mileage reimbursement, along with many other staff members.
Anything, Ruthina, from you? Okay, thank you very much for that. For the consent agenda, are there any items directors would like to pull?
Can I pull number 6?
Any others? Okay, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item 6?
I move to approve the consent agenda minus item 6.
I second.
Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. Wonder if we need to reboot.
Do you think that's what I need to do?
I think so.
I'm voting against it.
Against, okay. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with Directors Rutland, Ressler, Godwin, Malone, and Eystone voting yea, and Director Hemingway voting nay.
Thank you. Item 6.
Just last year, I abstained because my husband is specifically named, and so that's the only reason why I wanted to pull item 6.
Okay, thank you. Any further comment? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve item 6?
So moved.
Second.
Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open.
Did you get logged in too?
Yes.
All votes have been cast and the motion carries with Directors Rutland, Ressler, Godwin, Eystone, and Hemingway voting yea, and Director Malone abstaining.
Thank you. Next up, discussion item, sustainability carbon footprint update. I think, Steve, you're going to give us an update?
Yes, I had a great meeting with Eric Giddens. He works for the University of Northern Iowa Center for Energy and Environmental Education. You may be familiar with that because they've done quite a bit of work with our integrated pest management group. So they're both very familiar with the community and also have done quite a bit of work in this area, although interestingly with municipalities and not with schools yet. They're very excited to work with us. We'd be the first school that they would do a comprehensive carbon footprint analysis, an emissions analysis. And actually, just as we were walking into the meeting, I got the initial proposal from Eric, and I'll have a chance to go over that over the course of the next week here, give you some feedback on that. But the idea is that they would actually develop for us that baseline for greenhouse gas emissions, knowing something about our district record keeping already. He actually thinks that they may be able to go back in arrears so that we can not only see where we are today and where we're going tomorrow, but perhaps where we've been over the course of as far back perhaps as 10 years. So that would give us a good both backward-looking and forward-looking position. Of note, that last bullet on there, we spent some time talking about the Green Iowa AmeriCorps program, and it's a program that you notice one of the things on the third bullet, he talked about quite a bit about not just the infrastructure piece, but also behavior of employees as being a key part of this process. And he shared that the Green Iowa AmeriCorps program is really designed for municipal entities like the school district to bring in some people through that program that would help us with that behavioral part of the process. So that was something that he said he'd include in the proposal when he got that out to us.
Great.
Does the scope of that include transportation and stuff, or is it just the buildings?
It's, again, we'd be their first district, so he is open to doing absolutely everything that they have the capacity to do. So I haven't seen the details in that proposal yet, but he essentially said if they had the ability to provide us with baseline information on it, they would include that in the process. So I don't know about transportation, but I ask about that. I ask everything, literally all of our departments. We kind of went through how the district operates. We talked about everything from our facilities. Again, we talked about people and how big our staff was and that kind of thing. We talked about transportation, talked about food service. So they're very interested in looking at us holistically.
Yeah, definitely transportation has to be looked at, and also student transportation, because, you know, that's a huge part of it. And if you want to cut emissions by 50%, you can cut parking stalls. And I thought the two little girls that came over at the last meeting and talked about why we're using plastic silverware, to tell you the truth, that one had gotten by me. I didn't know we made a switch from steel to plastic, and that's a very, you know, that seems to me that's a very easy thing to do, and we should be able to get some life cycle returns on that and things that way. So, but I think it should be wide. It should be a wide scope, and it should look at the environmental. I spoke with 2 engineers last night and today concerning this topic, and I think it's important, too, that we get an environmental life cycle analysis of the district as well, and its grounds.
Steve, are there any fees associated with this service?
It's very minimal. Again, because it's part of the outreach from the university, and again, I haven't seen the proposal yet, but the software base that they use, I think the fee is $300 per school to use it. So, and then they haven't done it with an entity that has as many individual sites as we have, because they've been used to working with cities. So he wasn't sure whether or not there might be a discount for that as they went through it. Again, we're their first district that would do it, so they're very interested in getting us in. So I'm hoping that that helps us from a pricing standpoint. But
This is with UNI.
yes, the University of Northern Iowa.
Have we reached out to the U of I and Iowa State too, as far as what they might have? in
They
this arena?
recommended that we go to UNI.
That they go, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
They're the home for this.
Interesting.
They're the home for this municipal piece of software.
Okay.
In the state. It's a nationwide software platform. It's used with municipalities all over the country, and apparently they look for one hub in the state to run it, so it's at UNI.
Okay, excellent.
If there are some expenses, can they come out of Pebble?
Probably depends on how they write those. Yeah, I'm guessing that
They're
unless
shaking their heads.
unless it's actually a physical
Frank's
expenditure,
thinking
or
about
if it's a software service, but I think it's them owning the software and us using the software, in which case we probably can't.
So general fund?
You'd have to format it correctly in order
Yeah.
to take it out of public.
And I think that the only piece of it that I think could come out to be the software, if it came as a software service, and
Purchase that.
yeah, and I don't think we wind up buying it. Yeah, I don't think we wind up buying the software, but we'll ask them about that.
Thanks for that update. Any other comments or questions? We can move to the next item, another update, Steve, on the alternative energy sources.
So we met with Eagle Point Solar, and Leslie's already hard at work with them, getting them the information that they need so that they can do a site analysis. What they're going to do, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped over one. Let me go back to Shive Hattery. My screen was cut off there. So we already had a conversation with Shive Hattery about doing our analysis of our rooftops. One of the things that is required by the city of Iowa City, if you're going to put any solar on the rooftop, you actually have to have an independent engineer do an analysis of the rooftop. So that's a requirement of that process, regardless of who you might select as a vendor to work on your solar. So we've contacted Shive Hattery, asked them to do a rooftop analysis for us of all of our roofs. They're in the process of working up a proposal for that, which we'll be able to bring back to you at a subsequent board meeting. But simultaneously, we're working with Eagle Point Solar, and they have volunteered to come in and do an analysis of all of our grounds. So they're in the process right now of collecting data from Leslie in terms of our current meter usage and that information. Once they get that all put together, then they'll be working with our grounds department to do a walkover of all of our facilities to assess them for viability for ground-mounted solar. Our goal when we're done with this is to both understand our rooftop capacity and our ground capacity, and we're hoping that that's something that we can get done here by the end of the summer.
Again, I think we need to look at the life cycle, the environmental life cycle implications of any solar activity. The cells, when they've reached their useful life, is a hazardous waste that just can't go in the landfill, and California's having some real concerns with their solar push out there, that it has turned out to be a unforeseen hazard. And I think that we should have our eyes open going into that, looking at it. So as far as an environmental impact of that, so.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you, Steve, making progress.
We're getting
That's
there.
good. We'll move into the action item portion of the agenda. The first action item is around our climate change resolution. Since the last discussion at our last board meeting, Steve prepared a resolution that sort of blended components of a couple of different options that we had in front of us. Just a couple comments I might make, and then Steve, if you've got comments too, I think I think the board was very clear in the last meeting that we wanted to move forward with this and get a resolution passed. I think there's also recognition that this particular resolution does not have all of the hard targets in it yet because of the activity that Steve just described. We're busy getting a carbon footprint analysis so that we understand what that looks like. We're working on our options and feasibility and a view of what we can do from an alternative energy source, in particular solar, and I think Phil's raised some good points around an environmental life cycle analysis as well. And so the way the resolution is crafted is noting that we're going to get those baseline data, and then based on those baseline sets of data, we will set hard targets, and by December 31st, 2019, we will revise this resolution to include those hard targets so that we have very concrete sets of actions that we'll hold ourselves to account to. So I think that's why this particular resolution doesn't have those hard targets in it. I know there was a desire for us to do that, but we felt strongly we needed to get that baseline data to set good targets for the resolution. So I think that's some of why it's crafted the way it is. So Steve or others, if you have comments, please.
I would just add, what we tried to do was we tried to cluster these based on the feedback that we've received from community input, both at board meetings and through other informal processes leading up to this. So when you look at the clusters, obviously that educational component in the form of content that we would find in our classes is the first resolution. The second one, again, is what we just discussed with that baseline of greenhouse gas emissions, and then using that to set reduction targets, and those would be in line with IPCC, which has been a big focus of some of the presenters that we've had in. The next one on there talks about the use of renewable sources. One thing I didn't touch on when we were up above, just because we haven't gotten that far into the process, is to consider what the role of wind energy is. I presume that we're going to run into some challenges with that, but I think that that's something that we should take a look at when we consider it, just to make sure that we've covered all of our bases. And so to look at the renewable energy sources that are available to us and use those to set some targets. The next resolution on there talks about the work that we do in the building. When you look at buildings, when you look at facilities and operational priorities, and those cover everything from construction, maintenance, landscaping, transportation. The next one talks about recycling. The next one after that talks about our nutrition services program. And then again, the next one talks about coming back with some more specific data on it. And I think the last one's also an important one, and that's that we consider our role from an advocacy standpoint. You know, one of the things that'll come to you as we move into July is it's that time for us to start thinking about what our legislative priorities are. I'm not saying that this needs to be one, but I think as we think about that, what's our role as a district from an advocacy standpoint, both here locally with our other municipal partners, but also on the state and the national stage.
That's great. And then Phil, you gave us some
Yes,
modifications too.
I was working through it, and like I say, I was in discussion with several different engineers, many generations younger than me, but that are very into this subject. And there's some things in here that I'm not 100% with, but I think if these things would be added to it, I would have greater I would have support for it. And with the district curriculum, I think everybody's got a copy. There, I would just like to see sustainable agriculture or something to the fact that, we have got to recognize that agricultural education is a part of this discussion. And I've said it before, but, you know, when I took ag classes, conservation tillage was coming on, and no-till was kind of out there. Well, conservation tillage is widely recognized and utilized, and no-till planting practices is widespread as well. And that started in the high schools. And I think it's very important for us it's easy for us in the fifth largest school district and having a Big Ten college in our community to lose track of how important agriculture is to our state. And that this has got to be part of that discussion, and it's got to be part of the educational component, and it's got to be part of the solution. So putting in there sustainable agriculture as part of our curriculum, I think, is very important. Then when we come down to be it further resolved that the district engage with energy consultants, I wanted the inclusion there of a complete life cycle analysis, having an environmental assessment with scope to include but not limited to all ASC related transportations, green space, and physical boundaries. And there it's just the effect on our physical and our, you know, we're in charge of a large amount of lands and green spaces, and its management is also part of that resolution and part of what we want to do going forward. Also, I thought it was important at this time to put in that the district should discontinue the use of known carcinogens such as glyphosate, Roundup, and dicamba on its school grounds. I think that only makes sense from a risk avoidance standpoint, and also from an environmental and renewable source. Then the one that gave me the biggest concern, and I guess I am going to speak for the cows, that let it further be resolved. In my rendition, I struck part of the sentence and said that the district will develop menu plans and food waste reduction programs with sustainable agriculture and sustainable food practices. And I think it's important. I thought that the statement that was trying to be inserted, as much as Mr. Biggers and the students were trying to be not partisan, but there was a very big vegetarian push for that. And I think if you talk to pediatricians, and children require complete proteins in their diets and iron. And those that come to our schools are very reliant on that source of protein. And I think for us to go down a path where we're saying we're going, and we already had tried that vegetarian push in our elementary schools with less than satisfactory results, with a lot of things being thrown away, as I remember that discussion. So that was one that I had concerns with, and I think the science on bovine flatulence and things like that is not based in true science, that a lot of methane comes from decomposing materials in rainforests and natural terrain. That way, much of the earth is covered with land that is only suitable for grazing. It's a great source of protein for human beings. And if you look at the development of man, one of the greatest jumps in our evolution is when we started to consume protein in quantity, that the brain size expanded and things that way. Not saying that people that eat more meat are smarter than those that don't, but just that I think that that's been proven evolutionally. So that was one that I felt I had real trouble with pushing that. I think that it's important that our students have a source of protein. They're growing, they're developing their bodies and their minds. And the plastic, and excuse me, and the, I didn't put it in, but the plastic, getting back to metal silverware and something that can be washed and cleaned and reused multiple times, I think is something we have to look at going back to. And like I say, have to admit some ignorance there, that is something that I was unaware of, that we had made that switch.
Thank you. Comments, questions?
When we got the first batch, it actually didn't have the line about the recycling, so I wanted to make sure we added that in, and it's in there. Pretty straightforward line. I think that's kind of an important part of this whole thing. I think I agree with Steve that we should be looking at all renewable energy sources. We can't just pick one. No matter how many people parade in front of us talking about one thing, there are other things out there, and if the goal is to try and save our planet, there are other ways to do it. And I think most of the edits that Director Hemingway put in there, I don't really have a problem with most of that wording. Particularly the last one that he was talking about, I kind of raised an eyebrow at myself, to be perfectly honest, so I'm okay with it. I know that the one that's going to stand out to probably some of our facilities guys is the ones about carcinogens and using those chemicals. I will say that it stands out from the rest of it as we vote on it now. That's saying that it's stopping today. So it comes out differently than the rest of it. So there is that. I will put this out there anecdotally for folks that just today on the radio, one of those ads comes on. It's a law firm, and it was, "Hey, are you a groundskeeper? Do you have cancer? You might be entitled to money from using Roundup." Right? So it's a thing, and it's out there, so it's not something that you can just dismiss. I am a little leery to just jump on tonight and say we're going to stop using it in this format. I don't disagree with the sentiment at all, but it's a little outside, I think, from the rest of the scope of the plan.
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, I have no problem with the sustainable agriculture part that you put in there. I mean, you added in a part on having like a complete assessment, including transportation and everything. It sounds like maybe we're getting that. I think it was more the environmental effects side of it that you wanted to add in there, which I'm okay with that as well. So I don't have much problem.
And just to clarify on the glyphosate and Roundup and dicamba, I was on the IPM committee. That was one thing we struggled with the committee and we fought with. The community wanted that banned. And at the time, it has been banned in Europe, it's been banned overseas, it's been banned in Canada, and some states have stopped the use and stopped spraying on public grounds. There was no link. The case in which it was the lawsuit in America where it was lost, where the first case was successful in suing glyphosate, was a school groundskeeper who sued for cancer that he received that way. And there's been some since then. So it's I look at risk avoidance. Okay, no one's going to die from a dandelion. That's been proven. That's just not going to happen. I look at it as that, I don't want it to be forced on us. I think we're proactive. I think we're in front, and it's something that we can definitely do without. And I think our community would be very appreciative of it. The county does very limited things. Like I say, when we were doing our IPM committee, the state of New York doesn't do it on any public grounds. Canada doesn't do it. So there are areas that get along without it. It's just, now there's been some precedent set in the United States that way on that. So I just want to clarify. And when we were meeting as a committee, that hadn't happened. Now it has happened. So I think if this was happening with our committee, there might be a different outcome. But I appreciate your sentiment for the diet as well.
While on this topic, I did have an opportunity to talk to Dave McKenzie today, who is the chair of your IPM committee. Dave's very aware of the 2 court cases in California that have ruled against Bayer and the Roundup and the glyphosate. There's a 3rd case that's being tried in St. Louis coming up here on very similar types of grounds. He did contact the U.S. Health Organization, some officials there. He went to Iowa State University and contacted some of their experts there. And the general feedback that he received is that there's still no scientific evidence that glyphosate causes cancer. And even with the U.S. Health Organization, they said around the world, that's the scientific stand. Now you're going to be able to pick and choose and cherry pick those things that you want that come out different than that, but that's their official statement and that's their official stand on the science. That's been presented to the IPM committee, and the reason why the IPM committee chose to go the direction they did and allow this to be in the district's toolbox is more than killing dandelions. You don't kill dandelions with glyphosate. Glyphosate's used to basically sanitize things that need to be sanitized, and it's extremely difficult to maintain sports fields. It's extremely difficult to kill poison ivy and those hazardous plants that are out there that are confronting our campuses just as much as the dandelions do. And it's an important tool in the toolbox. So this would really, in my opinion, co-op all the work that your IPM committee has put in. And I would like for you to hear from Dave McKenzie before you would act on something of this nature in this way. I did ask him to be in a proactive stand to write you a letter today and explain what he's learned from these various officials and give you that perspective on where we're at and really how little we use. And when we do use it, the application and how we use it, it doesn't come in contact with our children or any other staff members. And so I think there's an educational process that I would love to see the board go through before, so you can make an informed decision rather than just an emotional decision at this point in time. Because the science doesn't bear it out. You have 2 court cases, sure, against it, and there are more to come. But it's just something that I really believe pretty strongly that there has been a committee in place, a process that you sanctioned, hardworking people who have put time and effort into this, and then just to, on a feeling and emotion, undercut them and all of that work. It seems to be a bit disingenuous from my perspective, and I would love for you just to shelve that idea until you know more. You can always come back and include it or amend your resolution or do whatever you need to do in that area. But it just seems that you need to have a broader perspective, maybe a little bit more understanding of how the district is actually using or even not using glyphosate at this point in time.
Thanks,
Well, I appreciate what Dr. Hansel has to say. It's not emotional. There's a lot of places in the world that don't use it, Craig, and we both know that. We choose to use it because it's chemical trimming instead of mechanical trimming. And we can do it. We can save money. But personally, I'm not willing to take that health risk with our kids on our school grounds. That's me personally. If you want to take it out, you can take it out. But there's a lot of other things in here that I can get engineers, environmentalists, scientists that'll say we're all wet. But I'm going along with it just because clean air, clean water, that's a good thing. And like I say, I'm accepting some of this, having talked to two highly educated individuals today that see both sides of it. And we're erring on, let's be a little bit more cautious. That's what I'm looking at here. And Iowa State will defend Roundup with their last dying breath, and we both know why. And I'm not calling for removing it from row crops. I'm just saying on playgrounds and trimming around buildings, I think we can do better. But if the group wants to take it out, I don't have a problem with it. But it's not an emotional decision. I just think when we're talking about students' health, you know, lead paint was a good product, lasted longer, but we found out there was problems with it, and now we've banned it, and there's all kinds of things we do to it. Same with asbestos. I just want to make sure that we have healthy environments and things for that for our students. But if we want to wait until there's further conclusion, I will go with the benefit of the group. But the other items, I'll be very firm on.
I don't have a problem with a lot of the proposed changes that we just saw tonight from Director Hemingway, but being that I just got a copy, unless it was emailed out earlier, tonight, that's just not our standard of practice to make edits from the board table. I would like to see us include most of these once we go back in to amend them, but I don't know if that's our standard of practice to make amendments when we're the only ones able to see this tonight. That's just, we just don't operate or haven't operated that way from the board table. So I'm not saying let's not do it, but we've had discussion on other things when we want to be transparent with the public. So that's my concern.
There's nothing more transparent than having a discussion in a public forum, and that's what we're doing right now.
But typically the question...
Communications and emails that the public doesn't see is not very transparent.
Can I make
But
a
the
suggestion?
public can't see
Can I make a
this.
suggestion? So we also in the past have typically reviewed these kinds of things multiple times before we voted on them. So is there a reason we need to vote tonight? Can we continue to work on it?
Yeah.
And vote maybe a month from now or something? And maybe put it on a work session agenda? Because I do agree that I like a lot of these changes. I also agree that when we do something that's binding, such as this, we do typically take multiple attempts at it. We put it out there, we get feedback, we put it out there, we get feedback multiple times before we make it official. So I would propose that we put it off, and I think our folks that want us to do this will understand that we're trying to do the best product possible, and therefore it takes time.
Absolutely, and I agree with the group that said they wanted 3 readings, and if we want to start doing 3 readings, I am 100% for that, and I'm 100% for things being in the open, and not rumor and innuendo spent behind people's backs.
Okay. Well, any other comments from other directors? Paul, you haven't weighed in. Any comments? I mean, I could go a couple of directions. On the one hand, I do absolutely appreciate the sentiment of taking more time to get more input, the 3 readings. I was actually comfortable with approving what was presented, and I was actually comfortable approving all of the edits that Director Hemingway had requested, with the one exception around the carcinogens. I was persuaded by Craig's comments around the IPM and wanting to hear from the IPM committee and their take on that particular item, and I think that group could have brought forward, if they wanted to do a resolution, we could have gone that route with that committee's input. The reason why I was willing to take this forward a little bit more aggressively than our standard process, because we have steps in here to gather more data and to come back and revise it. it explicitly says we're going to gather more data, we're going to get the targets baked in by December 31st. So because we've got a clause in there around revisiting with data in a pretty short time frame, I was okay with being a little more aggressive in actually acting on this tonight. However, if the board's sentiment is that we do need to spend another work session on this, that we need to do some more wordsmithing, my humble opinion is that we're probably not going to make a whole lot of other edits, knowing that we're collecting baseline data and are going to come back in the next few months and actually amend this resolution. So that was my take on it, but again, you know, it's the director's sentiment that we need to follow tonight. If we need more time to talk about it, we certainly can.
I also think that, that I would like the community to be able to see, if we're making edits, I would like them to see that on board docs.
Before
We make those
Okay.
edits. I'm not really comfortable with, even though I like the edits, I'm not comfortable with voting on something that the public can't view while we're talking about it.
Fair enough.
And just for clarification, I'm going to continue to move forward on the items that we have
Please.
listed up there, so I'll continue to provide updates for you. I can add this to the agenda for our meeting in July and have a revised version of it ready so that it's presented on board docs, visible to the public, and then updates on the other work that we're doing with the other groups that are looking at
Let's
our
cover it in
components.
agenda setting, and we'll decide if we want to have a work session discussion before we actually bring it back for an action. We'll get to that in an agenda setting.
Very good.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, the one other comment I was going to say is, as Sean pointed out, the one resolution regarding the carcinogens is a different directive than the others, but it could be made to fit. It could say something more like, be it further resolved that the district will work with the IPM committee and their recommendations and strive to follow them to fidelity. Or something to that degree, so that we are recognizing that that is an element of our sustainability effort. And I actually think that would be helpful to put that on paper, so that it brings some accountability to the board and also recognizes the work that they've done too.
Yeah.
And in some of the earlier versions from the public, there was reference to the IPM as a successful model of changing, and we have drastically reduced the chemicals in our buildings, which is fantastic. That came because of the IPM committee and those discussions. But like I say, I think that's a great suggestion, and if we're going to discuss it further, I think that that's great. I apologize with my new employment. It does not leave me much time to get things in, but like I say, this is a public forum. We discuss things on the fly here all the time, and that. But I think more public input on this is definitely better than not.
Okay, very good. Well, we're not going to act on this action item tonight. Is that the proper, we just choose not to act on it? Okay, we'll move on to the next action item, Fiscal Education and Recreation Levy Resolution. And I think our intent here is to keep our choices and options open. I think the actual resolution is intentionally broad because we as a board would need to decide how we would want to craft it. And so really at this point, it's keeping our options open to pursue this should the board wish to go down that path.
I think the best analogy for you would be our general obligation bond. The language in that was broad, and yet our facility master plan was very specific. My suggestion to you as a board would be, again, you look at the broad language as authorized in the statute for the resolution, and then we develop a Pearl action plan for that that would then help us as we explain to the general public what our plans are for the process.
So I have a question. What are we doing tonight with this? Are we committing that this is on the ballot for sure? No. Okay. What are we doing with this vote?
If you look at the calendar that's laid out in front of you, tonight is a board's discussion of the Pearl election, and then it would come back to you on July 9th as a recommendation from the superintendent if you have any feedback for him tonight. If you want to tweak the resolution, If you want to make it different than how it was written in its broad nature, now's the time to have that discussion. And then he'll bring that back on the 9th, and then the board can actually take action on that ballot, draft ballot question, and then that would start the process of moving that forward at that point in
Okay.
time.
I just asked because it was listed as an action item, and I guess I wasn't sure that there was closure on the fact that we've decided that this will go on the ballot. I think there was still some question between board members of whether it should or not.
And you can
I
definitely
just
have
want to
that
keep that
discussion.
option open.
Right.
Yeah.
That we're not committing that it's, not so much the wording that I'm worried about, it's our intentions, whether we are locked into that, because I think there's folks that are still ambivalent about that.
Yeah, fair enough, and I don't think we're locking in to having anything on the ballot November 5th.
No.
Not
This is
till
just
September.
Yeah, this is just keeping those
Right.
options open.
And
If we
September
choose to
is-
do that, we may choose not to.
Like the bond, I would hope that we have a lot of community outreach, opportunities to discuss with the community this new tax that would be in effect till perpetuity, or perpetuity plus 6 months, whatever that would be. But I think there's a lot of people in the community don't understand completely.
Fair
And
enough.
there should be a very big educational component to inform the public and actually what it can be used for and what it
Correct.
can't be used for.
Yeah.
And that needs to be
That
not
includes
just,
me.
we think it can, you
I
know,
really
that
don't.
needs to be
No.
really locked up.
So Craig, just to follow up on my email that I sent out that was responded to today,
Right.
can you explain, since your time with us is limited here, what exactly is defined as a public recreation place?
Well, you have to turn to the Iowa Code 300.23 or something, it's 300 something, where it talks about the community education program to really get the essence of what you can spend Pearl dollars on. And there has to be that community use component to any expenditure that you use for Pearl. And so, under the question that you presented, could we build a wrestling room? Could we build a gymnasium? If we went into partnership, in my opinion, if we went into partnership with the city of Iowa City or Coralville, one of our municipalities, and we put a standalone structure somewhere, and we wanted to have a 2080 agreement, we wanted to put Pearl money against that, you could build a facility for community educational use under that structure. But if you put a gymnasium or a wrestling room inside of a school building, and you use it for general education purposes, you can't use Pearl dollars to construct that facility, okay? And so it just seems like that's a bit of a stretch when it comes to utilizing those Pearl dollars to say, oh, well, we would use the gymnasium from 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock for community education purposes. You better get a really firm opinion on that, because in my opinion, it doesn't meet the test of how you need to spend Pearl money on a physical facility that's also being used for the primary portion of the day for regular education. Just doesn't seem like that's how they intended Pearl to be used. So that was, I tried to make that explanation as feedback to you on that, and the board probably didn't do a really great job of it, probably didn't explain it real well tonight, but nonetheless, that's kind of how I believe it works out.
Yeah, I was just trying to get more of an understanding on what, public educational and recreational, in the reading, when it says places and playgrounds. I mean, obviously our playgrounds are used
Right,
8 to 3, 4 o'clock by our schools as well.
right,
So just a better understanding on what exactly that can be used for.
right.
Are we comfortable moving forward to approve this resolution? Knowing that we have more work
I
to
was
do.
confused that we're not approving anything tonight, right?
But we're,
Resolution or?
Because that's on the calendar to do it next time, not,
So if you look at the calendar, there's two options. One is you can approve it as it is tonight. The other one is that you can make any recommended changes. We'll make any draft edits to that and bring that back to you. So if it is as presented, acceptable to you, you can move forward with the resolution as it stands right now, recognizing that not until September would you authorize that it actually be placed on a ballot. So if there are changes that you want to see to it, now is the opportunity for you to share those, and then we will come up with any edits that are required, bring it back to you at the next meeting.
Yeah, I understand the need for the flexible language, right? Like, we can't paint ourselves into a corner, but just, reading it as it is, like, I don't know what that means, reading it.
Okay.
And we've talked about it quite a bit, and I still don't know what that means. I don't know if it's as simple as, after basically what Pearl stands for, right? Adding such as this and this. It's so vague that if I'm going up to a ballot and I haven't had that community outreach and education, and I'm going to read that, I have no idea what that means. And that's going to be a hard thing if there's not something more to, I don't know what it should be. It feels so vague that I don't know what people, I think that will lead people to vote no because they don't even understand it. And I know that there is the planned education stuff.
Yeah.
The bond itself, I think people generally understood it, and you just had to convince them the benefits of it. This, I don't think people will understand it as easily, and that vague language bothers me to a degree.
And that's part of what I think where the educational piece comes in. Even with the bond, you still had to educate people.
Yeah.
I did a lot of that. I know that not everyone knew what it was for. There was a lot of education
Yeah.
that went behind it.
I'm sensing, though, some discomfort in actually acting on this tonight, and I think maybe when we get to agenda setting, this may be something we want to talk about in the next work session.
So let me do two things. First of all, let me reach out to council. The one thing I will tell you, when you look at that paragraph that begins "shall the board," remember that our friends in the auditor's office, brevity would be their preferred method of operation. They like our resolutions to be as tight as possible because of the ballot space that it occupies. I think that's going to be increasingly...
This ballot's already going to be crazy.
Yeah, it's going to be an increasing focus of theirs that we not write page-long ballots. So I think that I'll need to talk to the folks in the auditor's office about length of ballot language. And perhaps one of the things, to your point, Sean, is that in this resolution itself, there may be an opportunity to add clarity in some of the subsections below that, such that what's passed by the board provides more detail, so that when people look back at it, that provides you a better opportunity to explain what this process is. So I can certainly work with them to see if there's an opportunity for us to add some of those, such as things that you're talking about in this resolution that's adopted by the board, recognizing that the ballot language itself probably won't change substantially, only because of the recognition of the limitations that we're going to have from the auditor's office. Does that help?
I think it'll help. I do have the concern that I think we're all sort of concerned about what compiling school elections with city elections is going to do in general, right? With some people are really informed on school things, and they hit every school election there is, and some people are very informed on municipal things and are hitting every city election there is, and there's crossover there, but it's not complete crossover. So then you've got all sorts of balls in the air and people, being invested in one thing and not another. And if something like this is on that ballot with already, as we mentioned, a whole lot of other stuff on it, and you're not getting that education piece out to everybody, it may struggle. Yeah, but as I recall, it's a 50+1, not a supermajority. So that helps, but I think the vagueness may hurt it in this context specifically. I think it'll be difficult.
I think the other thing to consider in that regard is that this ballot is also going to have the Hoover question on it. And so I think in that light, we want to be real careful how we word this, because it could, I think we just need to consider how that looks. Because this, to me, reads public recreation places and playgrounds. Would you like to demolish a school?
It's dispose of, not demolish.
Or dispose of, excuse me.
They both written in the affirmative, like both ballot
If you voted yes on this vote, you would also, and then you voted yes on the Hoover vote, you would
Right.
be approving the board to move forward with the plan that they already have in place.
I think, you know, if
think
there's
that's
an opportunity to put in that, such as an element that it portrays that this is programming, not so much facility, then it doesn't have that competing element that I'm a little
Exactly.
bit concerned about.
Exactly.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
If the Pearl vote was to happen in November and it didn't pass, when would be the next time you could bring it up again?
When are
6
the
months, but it
election?
depends, they changed them.
Yeah, they
They
did.
changed the dates on which we're allowed to have elections. It's got to be a minimum of 6 month window before
6
you
months
can come back
window.
to it, but I don't remember when the dates, those new dates are. They set new dates because of the November election,
Yeah.
so there are only specific dates that we can hold special elections on.
It
So
seems
certainly,
like
yeah, it can
we
come back next
provided that
November.
calendar somewhere along the
Yeah.
way.
We've seen it in a work
But I don't
session.
remember exactly what board meeting we did that in.
We'll go back and find it. We can, I'm
We can do that
sensing-
research.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sensing we need to have another work session discussion on this and just get clear on the board's intent. So we'll cover that in agenda setting. One,
I just want to add, if we're going to add, this is the second thing we're adding to a work session, we really need to make sure that we get to these in work sessions and cover them so that we can get them
Yeah.
moving forward.
yep, fair enough. I'm moving us on to the next action item, Emergency Operations Plan. I'm not sure we need any discussion here. Looking for a motion to approve.
We approve the emergency action plans.
Second.
Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next item is an action on private hearing recommendation regarding termination of employment.
I move to accept the superintendent's recommendation and terminate the teacher's contract as of June 30th, 2019, based upon the evidence received at the private hearing on June 24th.
Second.
This is a roll call vote.
It is a roll call vote, and only those members that were in attendance at the hearing are able to vote. Give me just a second here. Istone,
Yay.
Godwin,
Aye.
Malone,
Aye.
Wrestler.
Yeah.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next up, purchase of Cherry Creek Investments.
You have an offer to buy in front of you. We have talked about this as a board and admin team. Just to reiterate some of the facts, we are going to lose our warehouse space at Hy-Vee in this next coming fiscal year. And we have a really strong need for additional warehouse space. It's really important that we keep our support services going at the same time as we're expanding our educational program and adding buildings there in order to support them adequately. We did talk a little bit about things like insurance. This is in a floodplain, right? It's right next to our bus garage and a transportation facility, and both of those are in the floodplain. I did look at the FEMA map and talked with our insurance agents over this issue, and they have no concern about it. It's if 1 square foot of your property is in the floodplain, then the whole thing is listed for insurance purposes as susceptible to flood. But there's really not an additional charge for that because we have such a large property package of insurance and liability that is just a part of the overall blanket plan that we have in place for all of our property. And so it will be insured on the same basis as our transportation facility that sits right next to it. We also have had a chance to do some initial inspections of the facility, and while a steel frame building, as we discussed, would be our ultimate, the wood frame structure is in pristine condition because it's brand new, and we believe that it's an asset that would serve us for at least 50 years to come. While it's not perfectly ideal, and it would be nice to have that, it is available. It is available for us in the time frame that we need it, and I would recommend to you that we move forward with this property based on a couple of things. Number one, we have to complete our formal inspection of the property, and if anything's found that troubles us, we'll certainly call a halt to the purchase. And then also a Phase 1 environmental study. Now, we were fortunate because we have great people who keep good records around here. We did find the Phase 1 environmental study for our bus transportation facility that sits right next to it. So it's our hope that the consultant will be able to take that and grab a whole bunch of information from that, so it'll reduce the cost of our Phase 1 environmental study on this particular property. The current owner did not have one, nor have they have not done one that's available to us on a historic basis on that property. So we need to go through that hoop also. There are 2 tenants in this property right now. We do have those contracts. We have looked them over. The attorneys are working through those aspects on how to manage those tenants. And so that's in process. And all of this should be done by the end of July. And so around the 1st of August, should you approve this purchase offer tonight, we would be able to move forward with the closing. So do you have any questions?
So you're saying there are people in the building right now?
We would maintain the integrity of the current leases until such time as they expire. We wouldn't evict the tenants in those areas because they're really not affecting our. We don't need that space right this second. We have a lot of other space that we can use.
Okay, so, but how long do those leases go for?
Right, so one of them's coming up here really shortly, August time frame for a renewal decision. But the tenant has as much authority in the renewal decision as does the landlord. So if the tenant says they want to re-up for 1 more year, then we would honor that. And it's the same way as the one that renews in December, okay? And so we would be assuming those leases in this purchase.
So we might have 2 tenants for another year yet?
Yes.
Okay. And did your insurance give you any kind of a, I mean, with it being a wood frame pole building, is the existing bus barn, is that a steel structure or is that a wood frame pole building?
It is a steel structure, and I did talk to them about that, but this new warehouse actually has a chemical fire suppression system, and it has the required firewalls at the increments required for inspection in Iowa City, all installed. It was built correctly in that regard. So there's no additional risk as far as the insurance company is concerned for having that wood frame building.
Yeah. Well, my concern is that, you know, getting out of the Hy-Vee lease is 2 or 3 years too late, but thank God we're out of it. And it happens it happens under your reign. Thank you.
We'll get there.
We'll get there, exactly. But I'm going to vote no on it, and I discussed it with, you know, the wood frame, and it's not ideal, and I hate seeing us just continually getting into stuff that isn't the way we want it, and I would like to see an educational component. And we're talking a warehouse. We got a lot of land. There's a lot of land at West, there's a lot of land at Liberty, there's a lot of land we've got for a warehouse. And part of that warehouse could be something with a educational component for curriculum that we have destroyed and bringing something back. And I would like to see a combination with that. There are districts that utilize facilities for their students to pursue life courses that don't require debt, and put them right into the middle class. And so that's the reason I'll be voting no on it.
I just have one question, and I think we talked about it when we were discussing it before, but I can't quite remember. Is there, will we have construction involved to make it usable for what we want to use it for? Is there more cost there?
No, the only thing that we have to add is a loading dock on the one end, which is a fairly minimal cost to offload a semi at the height that's required. But other than that, no, it's very suitable for our needs.
We are also going to add some security fencing in addition to...
On the backside, there'll be some security fencing because there isn't any there now.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Other questions from directors? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Wait, Lori, you made that right. Second.
I'm ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with Directors Rotland, Ressler, Godwin, Malone, and Istone voting yea, and Director Hemingway voting nay.
Thank you. Now we'll go to agenda setting on the July 9th board meeting. Standard agenda, we've got one discussion item on legislative priorities. Steve, you referenced that earlier. And that's pretty much it. I think the things that we were deferring, we were looking to put into work session. And I would suggest we do that on the same evening, on the 9th. And we had one topic already on work session around the implicit bias evaluation, but I think we'd like to add a topic on Pearl to talk about how to make it more specific and just talk through pros and cons, and then also a discussion on the modifications to the climate resolution.
I'll just throw out there, as I will not be there on the 9th. For both the Pearl discussion and the climate resolution, I'm okay if we, ahead of time are kind of working it out electronically and whatever, and we get something that's up on, board docs that everybody can see ahead of time. And, working through the discussion that way ahead of time, so it's not necessarily having to wait till that work session, because I won't be part of that conversation anyway. But if others feel that it needs to be there to have that conversation and then vote on the next meeting, that's fine too. I just throw it out there that I'm okay with wordsmithing different things electronically as long as we get it up there for people to see prior to whenever the vote would happen on either one of those two pieces. So go either way.
I could go either way too. I feel like actually being in a room and finalizing language might be the cleanest. Email sometimes is hard to, we don't always get through to email in a timely way. I mean, I know I certainly don't, and I just think it might be cleanest to have a conversation, get clear on what language we want to have in it, and then post that for action on the July 23rd board meeting. That's my 2 cents.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, wordsmithing's hard, whether you do it in committee or do it by email. I just feel like maybe a work session, we might actually get it final and clean, and hopefully we can get your input ahead of time, Sean, so that your contributions are reflected in that work session.
Yep.
All right, and then climate resolution, Pearl climate resolution, implicit bias in the work session. Is there anything else that we want to cover in that one? That's a pretty good agenda.
So I had asked last time if we could have an update from Amy on the RAM, and do you have any idea on the time frame on that?
Yeah, they, actually, what I'm trying to do now, and I have to pull it up and look at it, it's getting both Amy and Diane here at the same time during the summer. I want to say it's 2 board meetings out. They'll both be here. They've got the data pulled. We'll be ready to go.
Okay, so like by
Yep.
the end of July?
The
Yes.
23rd,
Yeah.
meeting on the 23rd. Okay, good.
And I don't know if this is something for that meeting or for a work session at some point in time, but I think there needs to be a work session discussion on the OSHA complaint and a discussion on workplace safety in our district.
The other thing I would like an update on is the grant that's been submitted. And I'm not sure the timing of that, if that's going to be by the next board meeting, Steve, or if that's going to be later in July, but on the threat assessment grant
Right.
that's been submitted.
I'll get a timeline from that and get that sent out to you so you
And-
know what that looks like.
And
Okay.
to that effect, I know Chief of Police Matterly talked about all those agencies that wanted to be involved. He said he was going to share that email with us. I have not received a copy of that as far as the different agencies and what opportunities we might have to pool our resources and fund that if everybody takes a small bite of the pie,
Yep.
that type of a thing, since it's all public safety.
Yep, that's good.
And I'd also like to remind you that at the last work session, we didn't cover the mental health part of it. Maybe we're going to, and talking about that more.
Sure.
So that's on the,
So we'll have a short board meeting and a long work session on the 9th.
great.
Good. Okay, before we adjourn, there's a couple things I want to say. First, I want to thank Craig Hansel for all of your service to the district. We're certainly going to miss you. Your contributions tonight are just a small example of what you've done for us. I mean, your guidance, experience has helped me sleep well at night, even when we're having to go through tough kind of budget discussions. We've been able to get great, interest rates and sale of our bonds because we've got a great credit rating, and I think a large part of that is due to your fiduciary responsibility and just fantastic financial management. And we're sad to see you go. Leslie is going to keep us moving forward, and we're excited to continue to work with him and Nick as well. But I think we're just very sad to see you go, but happy for you in your retirement, and you've left such a great legacy here in our district. Just want to thank you so much. Also want to thank Jane, because this is our last board meeting with you two, and you've also similarly, both of you, right? More than 30 years of educational service, and what a career, what a difference you've made in our district and lives of students, administrators, teachers, you name it. So sad to see you go, but so incredibly thankful for all that you've done for our district and others. So thank you, and best of luck to both of you. And then the last thing I want to say is, as we're drawing the end of our fiscal year, probably don't do this nearly enough, but for Steve and your entire administrative team, want to thank you all for all that you do. I've learned that running this district is like running a city. It's bigger than most cities in the state of Iowa, and we do everything from feed to transport to make sure facilities are ready. We tackle hard problems like safety, but most importantly, we educate our students, and we do everything we possibly can to make them strong citizens in our world. And you all just rock it every single day, and can't thank you enough for all the work that you do, and just want to end the year on a big, giant thanks. So it's not easy, and we're super lucky to have the team that we have, Steve and your entire team. So from me, thank you all, and I think from the board as well.
Yep. I just want to add, I thanked Jane before we came to the meeting today, and I'd like to tell Craig his choice of shirt color today was spot on, so you're welcome. So, I thank you for me as well for everything that you've done for this district.
And I'll thank Craig as well. Very early on in my service, he tuned me up after one meeting, and I appreciate that. I think it's apropos we had a little dust up tonight. But Craig has been extremely helpful for me in educating me on school finance, which I think Mike Cooper said it best, and he had a master's in marketing. In all the years that he spent in school finance, he still didn't understand it. So it's very complex, and Craig does his best to make it easy for anyone to understand. And I appreciate all that you've done and the service you've given the community, and personally wish you all the best. And if you return to the farm, I think that'd probably be a good thing. So.
All right. Thank you all. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye.